The quiet surprise, it was a calm evening in Los Angeles, the kind of evening that carried a strange peace. The golden light of the sunset stretched across the city, painting everything in a soft orange glow. Keanu Reeves stood quietly near the window of his home, staring out at the skyline. The world outside looked peaceful, but inside him a small storm had begun to move. He had been thinking about something for weeks, something he wanted to do, something that wasn't about fame or money or movies. It was about a friend. That friend was Sandra Bullock. They had known each other for years. From their first movie together, there had always been a silent understanding between them. Not romance, not distance, just deep respect. They both had seen highs and lows in Hollywood, but through it all, they stayed grounded, stayed kind. And that was what Keanu admired most about her. But lately he had noticed something. Sandra had been quieter than usual. She rarely appeared in public, and when she did, her smile seemed a little forced. Rumors said she was taking time off, healing from personal loss. But Keanu didn't believe in rumors. He believed in showing up. So one evening, he decided he would. He didn't call her first. He didn't tell her anything. Instead, he planned something small but meaningful. Something that spoke louder than words. It wasn't about cameras or awards or grand gestures. It was about friendship. It was about reminding someone that they are not alone, even in silence. He called a few people quietly. One of them was Sandra's old assistant, who still worked with her from time to time. Keanu asked if Sandra was home and if it would be okay to send something over. The assistant paused, then said softly, "She's been having a hard week. Maybe something kind would help." Keanu smiled faintly. "Then that's what we'll do." The next morning, Sandra woke up to the sound of a small knock at her door. She opened it to find a delivery man holding a wooden box. It wasn't fancy, just simple and clean, tied with a white ribbon. There was no sender's name. She looked confused but accepted it anyway. When she opened the box, she found a small note sitting on top of a folded piece of cloth. The note read, "You once told me that life is about little moments that remind us who we are. This is one of those moments from someone who still believes in your light." Under the note was a delicate white dress, one she had worn in their very first interview together years ago, back when speed had just made them both stars. She gasped. How did he even find it? Her hands trembled a little as she touched the fabric. Memories rushed in. Laughter, nervous smiles, the feeling of new beginnings. She sat down, and for a moment she just stared at the note. She didn't need to guess who it was from. She knew. Later that evening, Keanu received a message from her. It was simple. "I don't know how you found it, but you made me cry. Thank you." He smiled, typing back only 2 words. "You deserve peace." But what neither of them knew was that this quiet act of kindness would set in motion something much bigger. Something that would touch not only them, but millions of hearts around the world, because someone nearby had seen it all. A neighbor who happened to record the moment Sandra opened the box and broke down in tears. They posted it online, not realizing what it would spark. Within hours, the internet was flooded with messages. "This is what humanity looks like. Keanu Reeves proves again why he's the most genuine person in Hollywood. We need more people like him." But Keanu didn't even know yet. He wasn't on social media. He didn't check trends. While the world was busy talking, he was sitting quietly in his home, tuning his guitar, unaware that a quiet gesture had become a global story. And Sandra, she didn't care about the attention either. What mattered to her was something deeper. For the first time in months, she felt seen, not as an actress, but as a human being. And deep down, she felt something begin to heal. 2 days later, she called him. "Hey," she said softly when he picked up. "Hey," he replied, his voice warm but quiet as always. "You started something," she said, half laughing, half emotional. "People won't stop talking about you." "About me?" He sounded genuinely surprised. "Why?" she smiled. "Because you did something kind. And in this world, that's rare." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, in his usual calm tone, he said, "Maybe kindness shouldn't be rare. Maybe it should be normal." There was silence. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that felt peaceful. like they both understood something without needing to say it out loud. "You're still the same Keanu," she said softly. "And you're still the same Sandra," he replied. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then she whispered, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." And he said, "You never forgot. You just needed a mirror." But this was only the beginning, because a week later, something unexpected happened. The same video that had gone viral caught the attention of a group of children from a hospital in San Diego. They had written to Sandra months ago after watching her old movies, saying she made them smile through tough times. Now, after seeing how kind Keanu had been to her, they decided to do something in return, something neither of them could have imagined. A nurse recorded the children holding handmade cards that said, "Thank you for showing the world kindness," with tiny hearts drawn around the words. They sent it to both Keanu and Sandra through a fan page. When Sandra opened it, she cried again. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of purpose. She called Keanu immediately. "We need to go there," she said. "To San Diego?" he asked. "Yes, to meet them." He paused, thinking for a second, then said simply, "Okay, let's do it." And that decision, simple and genuine, would soon lead to one of the most emotional moments of their lives, because that hospital visit wouldn't just change the children's lives, it would change theirs too. The visit that changed everything the next morning. Sandra woke up earlier than usual. She stood by the window looking at the quiet Los Angeles skyline. The world outside looked peaceful, but inside her there was a mix of nervousness and warmth. She hadn't been out much lately. She had avoided crowds, cameras, and anything that reminded her of her past life in the spotlight. But this felt different. This wasn't about Hollywood. It was about something pure. A group of children who had reminded her what kindness could do. She looked down at her phone. There was a short text from Keanu, leaving in an hour. "I'll pick you up." She smiled softly. That was him. Simple, direct, thoughtful. An hour later, she heard a gentle knock at her door. When she opened it, Keanu stood there wearing his usual black jacket and calm smile. He didn't bring flowers or gifts. He brought his presence. Quiet, genuine, steady. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as I can be," she said with a nervous laugh. He nodded and led her to the car. There were no photographers, no reporters, no flashy cars. Just a plain black sedan parked outside. The world didn't know what they were doing that day, and that's how they wanted it. As they drove toward San Diego, silence filled most of the car ride. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Keanu occasionally glanced at her, and Sandra watched the road ahead, lost in thought. "You know," she finally said, "I haven't been around children in a long time. I'm a little scared." He smiled slightly. "Children don't expect anything. They just feel. If you're real with them, that's all they need." She looked at him. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" He shrugged. "Maybe because I've spent enough time in silence to listen." She smiled again, but this time her eyes softened. She understood. Keanu wasn't trying to sound wise. He simply lived with quiet truth. When they arrived at the hospital, the staff was waiting for them, surprised but overjoyed. The head nurse greeted them warmly. "We didn't tell the kids you were coming," she whispered. "We wanted it to be a surprise." Sandra and Keanu exchanged a glance, that same unspoken connection they had always shared. The nurse led them to the children's ward. The walls were painted with bright murals, rainbows, clouds, cartoon animals, but behind the colors, there was the quiet hum of machines and the soft rhythm of breathing. The children sat in small groups, drawing and laughing faintly, unaware of what was about to happen. Then the nurse said gently, "Kids, we have some visitors today." The room turned silent. Every little face looked up. And when Sandra and Keanu walked in, their eyes widened in disbelief. "Is that?" a small boy whispered. "It's Keanu Reeves," another gasped. "And Sandra Bullock." Within seconds, the room lit up with excitement. The children clapped and cheered. Some of them tried to get up from their beds, others waved from across the room. Sandra's eyes filled with tears instantly. She wasn't ready for that kind of love. Raw, pure, undeserved, yet freely given. Keanu knelt beside one of the boys who had drawn a picture of superheroes. "Is that me?" he asked softly. The boy nodded shyly. "You're the nicest superhero," he said. Keanu smiled. "You're wrong." He pointed at the boy's chest. "You are. You're still fighting. That's what heroes do." The boy grinned, his small eyes glowing with pride. Across the room, Sandra was talking to a young girl who had lost her hair from treatment. The girl was holding a stuffed rabbit. "My mom says you make her laugh," the girl said quietly. Sandra knelt down, her voice trembling. "And you make me brave," she whispered. The girl leaned forward and hugged her tightly. Sandra froze for a moment, then held her close, tears sliding down her cheek. The visit went on for hours. They played games, told stories, signed cards, and listened to the children talk about dreams. Not about fame or money, but about simple things like flying a kite, walking without pain, or seeing their parents smile again. Keanu noticed something. Sandra was glowing again. Her laughter, soft, genuine, unguarded, filled the room. It was as if the children had given her back a part of herself she thought she'd lost. When it was time to leave, one of the boys handed them a handmade card. It said, "Thank you for bringing light." Underneath, the children had written their names, surrounded by tiny hearts. As they walked out of the hospital, Sandra stopped in the hallway. She turned toward Keanu, her voice breaking. "I don't think I've felt this much love in years." He looked at her gently. "That's because you gave it first." She wiped her eyes, smiling through the tears. "You always say things like that. Do you even realize the effect you have on people?" He looked away for a moment, thoughtful. "I just try to leave people a little better than I found them." She nodded slowly. "You did that today." But something unexpected happened later that evening. As they left the hospital, a young nurse standing by the door recorded them. Not for fame, but because she wanted to remember the moment. She uploaded a short clip online showing Keanu holding the hand of a small boy and Sandra hugging a child with tears in her eyes. The video spread like wildfire again. Millions of people shared it, writing messages like, "This is what humanity should look like." They didn't go for cameras. They went for hearts. But this time, Keanu and Sandra saw the reactions. The hospital called them the next day to say that donations were pouring in. People from all over the world wanted to help those children. What began as a simple act of kindness had turned into a movement of compassion. When Sandra read the news, she was silent for a long time. Then she looked up at Keanu, who had come over for coffee. "We started something, didn't we?" He smiled faintly. "We reminded people of something they already knew, that kindness still exists." She laughed softly. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is," he said. "It's just that people forget." And as he said that, Sandra realized something she hadn't before. Keanu wasn't just kind. He was intentional. Every quiet act, every word came from a place of stillness. And that stillness had changed her too. She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for not giving up on people, even when the world makes it hard," he replied gently. "Thank you for believing again." And in that simple moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, but a bond made of respect, shared pain, and the kind of understanding that comes when two souls meet in truth. That night, as Sandra sat alone by her window, she looked up at the stars and whispered, "Maybe this is just the beginning." And she was right. Because what happened next, what grew from that single day, would take their lives in a direction neither of them could have imagined. It would test their strength, reveal hidden truths, and bring them face to face with something far greater than fame. Something that would make the whole world watch, cry, and believe again. The promise they made, the next few days passed quietly, but the world refused to stay silent. Every news channel, every social platform, every talk show was now speaking about what Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock had done. Not for fame, not for promotion, but from the heart. People called it the kindness ripple. Donations kept pouring into the hospital. Schools started their own acts of kindness projects. Small businesses offered free meals to children in need. And all of it began from one quiet moment, two people showing up when it mattered most. But behind all that noise, Keanu and Sandra stayed away from the spotlight. They didn't give interviews, they didn't talk about the visit. Instead, they spent their evenings sitting in Keanu's backyard, sipping tea and talking about life. the parts most people forget to talk about. One night, as they sat under a blanket of stars, Sandra turned to him and asked softly, "Did you ever imagine something this small could become so big?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Small things always grow when they come from the right place." She looked down at her cup, lost in thought. "You know, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm part of something real again." "You are," he said simply. "But it scares me," she admitted. "Because what if it fades? What if people move on and forget?" Keanu looked at her with calm eyes. "Then we'll remind them again." She smiled, but there was something else behind it, something unresolved, something she hadn't yet said. After a few seconds, she whispered, "I lost someone last year. That's why I disappeared." Keanu stayed silent, listening. "It wasn't just grief," she continued. "It was guilt. I stopped believing that the world had any good left. I thought kindness was just an act, something people do when cameras are around. But that day at the hospital, seeing those children smile again, it woke something in me." Her voice cracked, and she turned away to wipe her tears. "You reminded me that love can exist even in quiet moments." Keanu's eyes softened. "Pain never really leaves," he said gently. "But if you let it, it can teach you how to heal others." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "You really believe that?" He nodded slowly. "Every time I help someone, I feel a piece of my own pain fade away." For a long moment, they both sat in silence, the wind carrying the sound of leaves rustling softly around them. It wasn't just a conversation. It was a connection being rebuilt, piece by piece, through empathy and truth. The next morning, Sandra woke up to another message from Keanu. It was a simple text. "Are you free today?" She replied, "Yes, why?" He answered, "There's something I want to show you." 2 hours later, he picked her up again. This time, they drove toward a quiet part of the city. The air was cool and the streets were empty. Finally, he stopped in front of an old, neglected building. The paint was fading. The sign was cracked, but Sandra could still read the letters. "The Starlight Youth Center," she read aloud. "I used to come here as a teenager." Keanu nodded. "I know. I read about it once in an old interview of yours." She turned to him, surprised. "You remembered that?" "You said it was the place that taught you how to dream," he said quietly. "But it's been closed for years. I thought maybe we could bring it back." Sandra looked at him, speechless. "Keanu, are you serious?" He nodded again. "Yes, not as a movie project, not as publicity, just as a promise. To those kids, to ourselves." She stared at the building, her eyes filling with tears. "You really think we can fix it?" He smiled gently. "We fixed hearts. Fixing walls is easier." She laughed through her tears. "You make it sound simple again." "It's not simple," he said softly, "but it's worth it." That same week, they began planning. They called architects, volunteers, and local artists. The goal was clear: to reopen the Starlight Youth Center as a safe space for children to learn, dream, and find hope again. News leaked out, of course. And once again, the public reacted with love. Donations poured in faster than they could count. Even celebrities joined quietly, without fanfare. But Keanu and Sandra kept their promise. They did it with no sponsors, no red carpets, no cameras. Every evening, they worked side by side. Keanu helped carry boxes, paint walls, fix lights. Sandra sat with the children who came to help, teaching them how to paint stars on the new mural. The once-forgotten building started to come alive again, full of laughter, color, and purpose. And slowly, something inside both of them began to heal. One evening after everyone had gone home, Sandra stood alone in the middle of the newly painted hall. The golden sunset light spilled through the tall windows, making the place glow softly. She ran her hand along one of the walls, now covered in small handprints of the children who had helped. Keanu walked in quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. "It's beautiful," he said. She turned around, smiling. "It feels alive again." He handed her a cup. "So do you." She looked at him, her eyes shimmering. "You really think so?" He nodded. "You stopped hiding from the world. That's life coming back." She took a sip of tea, trying to hold back her emotions. "You know," she said softly, If someone had told me a month ago that I'd be doing this, painting walls, cleaning floors, starting something new, I'd have laughed. Keanu smiled. Life's funny that way. It gives you new chapters when you least expect them. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by silence and warm light. Then Sandra said quietly, "You know what we should do when it opens?" "What?" "Invite those children from the hospital. Let them be the first ones to see it." Keanu's eyes softened. "That's perfect." As the night grew darker, they stepped outside. The stars were visible again, scattered across the sky like the ones painted inside the center. Sandra looked up and whispered, "This place should always be full of light." Keanu nodded, his voice low but certain. "It will be. Because people like you exist." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "And people like you remind me that kindness isn't just a word. It's a way of living." For a long time, they didn't speak. They just stood there under the stars, the same quiet bond holding them together. They didn't need to explain what this meant. They both knew, but what neither of them realized was that this project, this small promise, would soon be tested in a way neither of them was ready for. Because sometimes even the kindest intentions are challenged by the weight of the world. And when that moment came, both Keanu and Sandra would have to decide how far they were willing to go to protect what they had built. The storm before the light weeks passed, and the Starlight Youth Center began to glow with life again. The walls were freshly painted with bright colors. Children's laughter echoed through the rooms, and volunteers came in daily to lend helping hands. Sandra and Keanu worked tirelessly, often arriving before sunrise and leaving long after dark. It wasn't about fame anymore. It wasn't about their names. It was about purpose. Every nail they hammered, every book they placed on the shelves, every child they spoke to, it all meant something. It was healing in motion. But just when everything seemed perfect, something unexpected began to unfold. It started quietly. One morning, Sandra arrived at the center to find a group of reporters waiting outside. Cameras flashed, microphones extended toward her. "Sandra! Is it true the Starlight Center is being funded by a movie studio? Keanu Reeves is using this project to promote his next film. Can you confirm that? Is this just another Hollywood publicity stunt?" She froze, stunned. "No, that's not true," she said softly. "This isn't about any movie. It's about the children." But the reporters didn't listen. They shouted more questions, twisting her words. Keanu arrived moments later and saw the chaos. Without saying a word, he gently placed his hand on her shoulder and guided her inside. Once the door closed, she leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. "How did they even find out?" she whispered. "Someone must have leaked it," Keanu said calmly. "But don't worry. The truth always stands on its own." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "What if they destroy everything we built?" He shook his head slowly. "They can't destroy kindness, Sandra. They can only misunderstand it." His words were steady, but even he knew how powerful rumors could be. The internet was already spinning stories, false headlines, made-up motives, fake interviews. Some people started questioning their sincerity. Others accused them of using the children for attention. Within days, the center's donation page was flooded with hateful comments. A few sponsors pulled out. Volunteers stopped showing up. The air that was once full of laughter now felt heavy. One evening, Sandra sat alone inside the half-finished art room, staring at the mural the children had painted. Her eyes traced the bright stars and smiling faces. But tonight it all felt distant, like the light was fading. Keanu walked in quietly. "You're still here," he said softly. She didn't look up. "I don't understand, Keanu. We did everything right. We didn't lie. We didn't use anyone. We just wanted to help." He sat down beside her. "Truth doesn't always win right away. It takes patience." Her voice cracked. "I'm not as strong as you. I can't ignore what they say." He turned to her, his eyes kind but firm. "You don't have to be strong all the time. You just have to keep showing up." She looked at him, tears filling her eyes. "But it hurts. To be judged for something good." He nodded slowly. "I know. I've felt it too." There was silence. The kind that carried shared pain, heavy but strangely comforting. Then, Keanu stood up and reached out his hand. Come on, she hesitated. Where are we going? To remind ourselves why we started. They drove through the quiet streets until they reached the hospital in San Diego, the same one where their journey had begun. When they walked in, the staff smiled, surprised to see them. The nurse who had recorded their visit greeted them warmly. You two are back? Keanu smiled faintly. We just needed to remember what hope looks like. She nodded and led them to the children's ward. The same children were there, a little older, a little stronger, but still fighting bravely. When they saw Sandra and Keanu, their faces lit up with joy. You came back! A small boy shouted. We missed you! Another said. Within seconds, the room was full of laughter again. The same warmth, the same innocence, untouched by the world's noise. A little girl handed Sandra a drawing. It showed two people standing under a glowing star, surrounded by children. At the bottom, in crooked handwriting, it said, Thank you for not giving up on us. Sandra's voice broke. This is why we do it, Keanu smiled softly. Exactly, and at that moment something inside her shifted. The weight of judgment, the noise of doubt. It all began to fade. She realized that the world outside could misunderstand, criticize, or twist their story, but it couldn't erase the truth written in these children's smiles. The next day, Sandra posted a simple message online. No long explanation, no defense. Just a picture of the children's drawing and a caption that read, We started this for them, not for cameras. Kindness doesn't need permission to exist. The post went viral again, but this time the world saw differently. People began defending them, sharing their own stories of kindness. Celebrities, doctors, teachers, everyone began posting under one hashtag. Keep the star alive. Within 48 hours, the donation page was full again. The sponsors returned. Volunteers showed up in even greater numbers. The Starlight Center was reborn stronger than before, and through it all, Keanu and Sandra stayed grounded, quietly working behind the scenes, never claiming credit. A week later, as they stood inside the finished youth center, the air was filled with music, laughter, and light. Children painted stars on the walls and a large sign hung near the entrance. Every kind act leaves a star behind. Sandra looked around, her eyes shining. We did it, she whispered. Keanu nodded. No, he said softly. They did it. We just gave them a spark. She smiled, then turned toward him. I was wrong about something. What's that? You said truth takes patience, she said. But it also takes faith, Keanu smiled gently. And you never lost it. You just needed to see it again. She looked at him, a quiet warmth in her voice. Thank you for standing beside me when I almost gave up. He met her gaze, his voice calm and sincere. That's what friends do. They hold the light when you can't see it. For a moment, they just stood there, surrounded by children's laughter and the soft glow of sunset pouring through the windows. It wasn't a movie scene. It was life, raw, real, and beautiful. And as they looked around, they both knew this was far from the end. Because kindness, once awakened, never stops. It grows, it spreads, and it finds its way back, even through storms. But destiny had one more surprise waiting. A letter would arrive soon, one that would take them on a journey far beyond the Starlight Center, to a place where they would face their deepest truths and make a choice that would define everything they had built. The letter that changed their path, the morning sun, filtered through the large glass windows of the Starlight Youth Center. Laughter echoed in the halls and children's voices filled the air like music. The walls shimmered with color and hope. Sandra and Keanu sat quietly in one corner, sipping tea while watching the children draw. Their dream had finally come to life, or so it seemed. But then, something arrived that neither of them expected. A small envelope lay on the front desk, plain and unmarked, except for one line written in gentle handwriting, for Keanu and Sandra, from someone you once inspired. The staff thought it was another thank you note from a fan, so they left it unopened. When Sandra picked it up, something about it felt different. She carefully tore the seal, and inside was a folded letter written on old paper. As she began to read, her voice softened. Dear Mr. Reeves and Mrs. Bullock, you don't know me, but my daughter Emily was one of the children you met at the hospital months ago. She always said you made her feel strong, even when her body wasn't. She watched your visit over and over and told everyone that kindness was real because you showed it. Emily passed away last week. Before she left, she asked me to write this letter. She wanted you to know that your kindness gave her something no medicine ever could: peace. She wanted you to believe that what you do matters. Thank you for giving her light. With love, Linda. Sandra stopped reading. Her voice trembled. Her hands shook. Keanu slowly reached for the letter and read it silently. He didn't speak. He just closed his eyes, breathing deeply. For a long time, neither of them said a word. The laughter of the children outside felt distant now, like an echo from another world. Sandra whispered, "She was so full of life. I remember her drawing stars that day." Keanu nodded, his eyes glistening. "She was the one who said I looked like a superhero." Her voice cracked. "And now she's gone." He looked at her gently. But she left something behind, her belief in kindness. She believed it mattered, and maybe that's her gift to us. Sandra wiped her tears. "We should do something for her." Keanu looked at her quietly. "Then let's make it count." A few days later, they traveled to Emily's hometown, a small coastal village in Northern California. It was peaceful, full of soft hills and quiet waves. They met Emily's mother, Linda, a kind woman with tired eyes and a gentle smile. "She loved you both," Linda said softly, holding the letter in her hand. "She kept talking about the day you visited. She said that if she ever got better, she wanted to open a small place for children like her, a place full of books, laughter, and stars." Sandra felt a lump in her throat. "She had a dream," Linda nodded. "She called it the Star Garden." Keanu looked up, his voice calm but full of meaning. "Then we'll make it for her." Linda stared at him, surprised. "You don't have to." But he interrupted gently. "We do, because she believed when the world told her not to. We owe her that." Over the next few weeks, they began building the Star Garden, a small learning center by the ocean, dedicated to children fighting illness. Keanu handled logistics quietly, calling in trusted people who never asked for credit. Sandra worked with local artists and teachers, helping design a warm, welcoming space filled with color and love. They kept the project private. No media, no publicity. It was a promise made in silence. A gift for one little girl whose faith had changed them. The locals started noticing their presence, but no one disturbed them. People brought food, offered tools, and joined in the effort. Kindness began to ripple again, quietly, like the tide that kissed the shore. And slowly, the Star Garden began to bloom. One evening, after weeks of work, Keanu stood by the ocean, staring at the setting sun. Sandra joined him, her hair blowing gently in the breeze. "It's almost ready," she said softly. He nodded. Yeah, she glanced at him. "You've been quiet," he smiled faintly. "Just thinking about her. About how someone so small could leave such a big light." "She did," Sandra whispered. "And you helped her shine brighter." Keanu turned toward her. "So did you." She looked at the horizon. "You know, I used to think fame was the only way to matter. That if people knew your name, your life meant something. But now, I realize it's the quiet things that last. The unseen moments." Keanu nodded slowly. "The ones that don't make headlines, but make hearts softer." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind carried the smell of salt and flowers. It felt like peace. The Star Garden opened quietly on a golden afternoon. A small group of children from nearby towns gathered to see it. They ran through the garden, touching the wind chimes, laughing as they found books on low shelves and art supplies waiting for them. Linda stood with Sandra and Keanu, tears streaming down her face. "She would have loved this," she whispered. Sandra smiled through her tears. "She's here. In every flower, every laugh, every smile," Keanu added gently, "and in every person who remembers what kindness feels like." The children released small paper lanterns into the sky, each one carrying a message of hope. As they rose, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. One lantern drifted higher than the rest, glowing brighter, as if Emily herself was smiling down at them. Sandra whispered, "Do you think she can see it?" Keanu nodded softly. "I think she's the one lighting it." That night, after everyone left, Sandra sat on one of the benches near the garden. Keanu sat beside her, the sound of the waves filling the silence. She turned to him and said, "You know, this started as a small act, a simple gift. And now it's changing lives." He smiled gently. "Kindness always multiplies. It never ends. It just finds new hearts to live in." She looked at him, her eyes full of quiet admiration. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I don't believe it," he said softly. "I've seen it." They both looked up at the sky where hundreds of stars shimmered above the ocean. For a long time they didn't move, didn't speak. The world felt still, as if time itself paused to honor the moment. But deep inside, they both felt something else. A calling. Something was urging them forward. They had built something beautiful. Yes, but the journey wasn't over. There was still more to do. And soon, an unexpected invitation would arrive, one that would take them far from the peaceful coast, into a world of flashing cameras, powerful voices, and choices that would test everything they stood for. Because the world had begun to notice them again, and this time, it wouldn't be kind. The world watched in silence. Weeks passed since the Star Garden had opened. The children's laughter had filled that small coastal village with new life. Sandra and Keanu visited often, sitting quietly among the children, helping them paint stars, plant flowers, and write their dreams in notebooks tied with ribbons. It felt peaceful, like life had finally come full circle. But peace, in their world, never lasted long. One morning, Keanu received a call from an old friend in the film industry. "You and Sandra need to see this," he said. "Turn on the news." When they did, the headlines were everywhere. Photos of them at the Star Garden, videos of children holding their hands, and news anchors discussing whether this charity project was a marketing scheme for an upcoming film. Hollywood's favorite duo or the perfect illusion? One channel said, "Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, kindness or calculated fame?" Sandra stared at the screen, speechless. "Not again," she whispered. "We didn't tell anyone about this." "How did they even find it?" Keanu sighed quietly. "The world always finds stories, even when we try to stay quiet." "But they're twisting it again," she said, her voice shaking. It was Emily's dream. It was real. He looked at her calmly. "Truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time." But this time, the noise was louder. The internet exploded with debates. Some defended them passionately, saying they were doing something beautiful. Others mocked, saying it was all for attention. Even a few people from Hollywood commented, some with praise, others with jealousy, disguised as concern. Within days, reporters began showing up at the Star Garden. Cameras surrounded the entrance. The quiet place that was built for children had become the center of chaos. That evening, Sandra sat by the ocean, her head in her hands. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "Every time we try to do something good, it turns into a headline. Maybe we should just walk away." Keanu sat beside her, silent for a moment, then said softly, "You can walk away from cameras, but not from purpose." She looked at him with tired eyes. "And if the world keeps twisting that purpose?" He smiled faintly. "Then we keep untwisting it, quietly, patiently. Kindness doesn't compete with noise. It outlasts it." She stared at him, tears forming. "How do you stay so calm?" He looked at the horizon, where the sun was melting into the ocean. "Because I've seen what chaos can't touch, peace. And it's right here, in moments like this." Her voice trembled. "But people will never stop talking." He nodded slowly. "Then let them talk. We'll keep doing." The next day, something unexpected happened. The mayor of the town visited them and said, "The children are scared of the reporters. They can't play freely anymore. Maybe it's best if you both stay away for a while until things calm down." The words stung. Sandra's heart sank. Keanu simply nodded in understanding. So they left quietly that evening, without cameras, without goodbyes. They drove through the long, winding roads in silence. The only sound was the ocean waves crashing against the cliffs. After hours of quiet, Sandra finally whispered, "Do you think it was all for nothing?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. Then he said softly, "Kindness doesn't need an audience. What we did, and it lives in those children. That's forever." She turned toward him. "You really believe that?" "I don't just believe it," he said. "I see it every time one of them smiles." Months passed. The noise eventually faded, as all noise does. New scandals took over the media, and the world moved on. But the Star Garden didn't fade. It grew stronger. The locals ran it beautifully. Teachers came from nearby towns to volunteer. Children kept learning, painting, laughing, free from the spotlight. Keanu and Sandra stayed in touch with Linda, Emily's mother. She often sent them pictures. Children reading under the trees, drawing stars, building paper lanterns. One picture showed a new sign above the garden gate. It read, "Kindness is not an act. It's a way of living." Sandra smiled softly when she saw it. She understood everything, didn't she? Keanu nodded. She did, more than most adults ever will. A few months later, they were invited to speak at a quiet charity event in New York. The organizers promised no cameras, no media, no glamour, just stories of change. After much thought, they agreed. When they arrived, the room was filled with teachers, doctors, and volunteers, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. As they walked to the stage, Sandra whispered nervously, "What do I even say?" Keanu smiled. "Tell the truth." So she did. She stood before the audience, her voice trembling but honest. "We didn't build the Star Garden to be seen. We built it because a little girl believed that kindness could outlive pain." She was right. It does. The room was silent. Even the air felt still. Keanu stepped forward, his voice calm and gentle. "The world talks too much about success and too little about sincerity. But the real heroes are not on screens. They're the ones who choose kindness when no one's watching." Applause filled the room. It wasn't loud or wild. It was deep, emotional. The kind that comes from people who truly understand. After the event, an elderly woman approached them. She said softly, "I lost faith in people a long time ago. Tonight you gave it back." Sandra smiled, tears forming again. "Thank you." Keanu simply nodded, his eyes kind. That night, as they walked back to their hotel, the city lights shimmered like thousands of tiny stars. Sandra turned to him and said, "You know what's strange? We started this thinking we were helping others. But in the end, I think they helped us more." He smiled. "They reminded us what matters." She nodded. "The world may forget headlines, but it never forgets hearts." He looked at her, then at the glowing skyline. And hearts are where the real stories live. They stood there quietly for a moment, the wind brushing past them, carrying the sounds of the city. "You think Emily would be proud?" she asked softly. Keanu looked up at the stars. "She already is." And in that moment, it felt as if the city itself slowed down. As if somewhere above, a little star shimmered brighter than the rest, smiling down on them both. Months later, the Star Garden celebrated its first anniversary. Hundreds of paper lanterns floated into the night sky, glowing gently like constellations of hope. No cameras were there, no reporters, just families, children, and laughter. A small plaque was placed at the entrance that evening. It read, "Dedicated to Emily, the girl who believed that kindness could change the world." And below it, another line, "Inspired by two souls who reminded us that silence can speak louder than fame." In the end, Keanu and Sandra didn't need recognition. They didn't need headlines. They had something greater, peace. They had become living reminders that the simplest acts, done with sincerity, can echo forever. Their story wasn't about fame. It wasn't about Hollywood. It was about two hearts, meeting pain with compassion, and turning grief into light. And even when the cameras stopped rolling, the world kept feeling their message, that kindness, once awakened, never dies. It only finds new stars to shine through.